like if I was someone that just come off the
Yeah.
street and sort of said, "Oh, I've heard about artecology, but I don't actually know
What we do.
what it is."
Yeah.
How would you describe that to someone? How would you answer that question?
Yeah. We're an organisation that is has set out to try and um, solve one small part of the gigantic global issue of biodiversity loss. And I suppose, you could take that a step further and talk about the extinction crisis. But that's kind of, we tend not to look at it on that global scale. We look at it on a regional scale. So we look at a local place, and then we try to make things that that can enhance local biodiversity and ecology in one way or another.
Yeah, but I guess one sort of important part is involving local communities and people, just ordinary people in that process.
Yeah,
Educating is part of that process as well.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a big part of what we do, but if you're explaining that, the sort of starting point of what we do, then we essentially we make things, and then and it's the process of making and installing those things that if you if you choose to, and we do, we can make that an engaging process or an inclusive process with the communities in which these places are going to be, in which these things that we make are going to be put. And part of the reason that we do that is because we come from backgrounds where that has always been a thing, working with communities in one way or another through our practices as creative practitioners and ecologists, and kind of almost like community workers, really, because artecology is a mixed discipline. um, it's the comfortable place for us to be. So although our contemporaries, are the people the organisations that work on things that might be, you know might be suggested they're working in the same field. So let's just say eco engineering. Ours is a very different approach to almost anyone else I can think of, or any other organisation that I've heard of that is working in this field. And the big difference is that we work with communities as well as working for wildlife. So, and that approach and that idea or ideology, whatever you want to call it, absolutely affects our methodology, the way we go about making things. And that's where craft and arts and crafts play a big role. So we are Artecology, the clue's in the name. Artecology is a mixed discipline approach to dealing with these big, massive subjects, but using art and science equally to try and to try and do something positive about it.
Yeah, just to add on to something you said a minute ago, I think we're starting to try and draw this connection that people and wildlife as a community, they're not separate communities, they're
Yeah,
one community.
yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, as our colleague Ian Boyd is often heard saying, we are ourselves medium-sized social mammals, and many of the kind of needs and wants that we have as a species kind of correlate really with the needs and wants of other species. So when we find ourselves together in the same place at the same time, i.e., towns, cities, villages, urban situations, you can design healthier places for both. And as you say, we don't really look at it as both. We just look at it as one audience that we're trying to make better places for. And and that's living things, and that includes us and the rest of the natural world.
Yeah. Well, what's kind of quite interesting about this conversation is the fact that it connects really well to the kind of new initiative that Artecology is launching itself into sort of soon, well, kind of immediately, which is the Artecology co-create. So do you want to sort of describe why that is sort of connected to this conversation, and what's sort of interesting about it?
Yeah, well, I suppose how best to explain that. It's been so the idea of co-creating things has been with us, as I said, I think already, but from the beginning, you know, we've carried this idea with us, and we've spent the last 10 years with Artecology understanding how to do what we do, how to, in terms of creating objects, designed objects that fit into the urban infrastructure that we've created as human beings, and allow wildlife to move in and find a way. I mean, a very simple and obvious thing that everybody will know about, that lots of people have got on their houses already or in their gardens, would be a bird box. And that's just a really simple version or example of what we do. You know, a bird box is a man-made object or a human-made object put in an urban environment that allows birds to breed in that environment. And so we're just taking that a step further, and we're making all sorts of other kinds of environments that attract not just birds but all sorts of things. And Artecology Co-Create is about inviting people to join us to learn about some of the things that we've learned over that 10 years, and to then we can transfer some skills to them about how to do it, you know, how to do it for themselves. And, you know, at this time, given the situation that the planet is in and everything on it is in, it seems like a very good time to do that sort of thing, to have a complete rethink about how we might run our business or our organization differently, you know, as I say, given the situation that we're in. And that's quite an interesting prospect, really, because we're still living in a growth obsessed, very business driven society, which is that is the thing that's caused all the problems in the first place. And so kind of, you know, whilst we have to survive, while we have to create income, else we can't do what we do, there's this other part of our organization that we can retreat to or use to step out of the system slightly and say, how should we judge efficiency differently in this space that sits outside of that growth obsessed business, you know, world. And Artecology Co-Create is that space, really. It kind of, you know, it's a place to reassess all of those things, and then think about you know, how you might get those life enhancing objects that we can make out into the world more effectively, really, but not being caught up or encumbered by business, which kind of gets and can get in the way. You know, it can actually mean that you're not doing the best that you can do, and that's quite interesting, because you're having to tailor it to, you know, the figure in the bottom right hand corner of your spreadsheet. And that's the, you know, there's a huge difference between working towards a number on a spreadsheet or a business plan and working towards optimizing the things that you can make to do the best that they can do in terms of ecological uplift and all that kind of stuff. We're not schooled to think about things that way. We're not, nobody is. It's, it would be madness if we all thought that way, because I suppose nobody would be able to make a living. But there's definitely space for that thought now, because we know what's driving all of the world problems, and it is business. It is growth obsessed business. And so in a way, I suppose you could look at it that Artecology Co-Create is a bit of a resilience project. It's a sort of, it's like a place that we can think differently about how we do what we do. And, whatever happens in the future with the system, if it can't support itself, if it collapses, and there are lots of cleverer people than me who foresee the collapse of the current system coming, because you can't have a growth only system on a finite planet. And that's sort of pretty well understood, but there isn't another answer. There isn't anyone coming up and saying, well, here's the alternative to that. And so maybe what we need is a lifeboat plan, and Artecology Co-Create is that. It's about enabling communities in the face of, whatever the problem is, but being able to skill them up to do things for themselves, So yeah, it's a tricky one, and we haven't thought it through completely, but that goes for almost everything we do. It's all a sort of an organic approach to moving forward without it being necessarily about growth.
Yeah, it is a pretty fresh idea, but it's, as you kind of say, it's going to be a pretty kind of empowering thing, I think. And sort of, as you were saying, at, at most, there's maybe four of us that we can call upon to make things at Artecology.
Yeah,
And there's a lot to do, and there's a lot that can be done. And by going down this route, it can
just
make a real impact.
yeah, absolutely. And it just requires a sort of a different mindset, to kind of allow yourself to let it happen, and because the only reason not to do it is because your head is in that space where you don't want to give ideas away. You want to, you want to be the owner of everything. You want to patent things. You want to, you want to make as, you want to trademark things, register things, all of that world versus, the Creative Commons or whatever it is, kind of the open ideas, get just allowing people to access stuff. And I think that at Artecology, what we've got to do is have a bit of both. I think we've got to have obviously, while the system is going, and we do have to create an income, or else you and I don't have jobs. We've got enough in that 10 years. We've learned enough about engineering and how to do these things to know that some things do require some specialist engineering and making to, for them to become products, whereas other things need a lot less specialist mixing of materials, steel and concrete and all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, even without those slightly more complicated ways of doing things, they still can be fantastically effective as objects. They can still be what we would call highly bioreceptive, and they can still produce spikes of ecological density wherever you put these things, and they don't require anything other than some folks with with an ability to learn, and given them, put the material in their hands, show them how to do these things, and they can come up with some really complex handmade habitat that I guarantee any of the eco-engineering companies around the world would struggle to compete with in terms of complexity of finish, because their bottom line is that it won't allow them to go that far. You know, they just wouldn't be able to afford to do it. And in fact, I think that if we end up working with communities, which is which is the plan, in the coming years, to work with more and more communities, I think those communities can outperform us even, because we still, we go to the Artecology studio and we, as we're doing at the moment, we're making some artificial rock pools and all kinds of things, and we're layering in complexity, but we still have to have a cut-off point. We still have to say, that's as far as we can go on this, or else the object will be too expensive and no one will be able to afford it. Whereas if you're a community group and it's not actually your full-time job, maybe it's a club or a hobby or whatever, you can keep going as much as you like on the object and make it more and more complex and more fit for purpose. And that's really interesting, because you then end up with voluntary groups being highly efficient, more efficient than civil engineers, because they can put the hours in and make these things, sort of unbeatable.
Yeah. And I mean, we stand to learn a lot from them as well, in the sense that no one's going to know their environment better than the local people themselves. So they'll
Yeah,
develop the right ideas if there is new ideas to be made, and likely develop their own techniques as well, because anyone that picks up the material that we work with tends to iterate on things or
that's
have their
right.
slight own style. So
They
it's,
do, yeah. No, that's right. And of course, if we can find a way to make this idea work, and let's face it, we can't do this for nothing, so we will have to help folks find funding to allow us to go and run workshops and training sessions and all that kind of thing. And I don't, we're not there yet. We will be in March, because we've got our first proper Artecology co-create training workshop ready to go to. And you know that will create some income for us. But if this became a steady flow, then we'd be looking at training the trainers, so that we're creating jobs as people go out and train other folks to make stuff. And then the trickle of income, the idea would be the trickle of income that's created through all of that activity comes back to HQ, Artecology HQ, and is rolled into all the activities that we do there, i.e. the next lot of R&D, the next lot of thinking up new ideas that then make them their way back out. So you've got innovation going on out there in the groups, because as you said, folks will pick up on the thread that we give them, and start innovating themselves. But from our point of view, what would be interesting is if we had money coming in that would allow us to spend time, well, it's play, really. I mean, it sounds a bit frivolous, but that's what it is. We need playtime, and if we can do that, then we know, based on the 10 years of experience that we've got, and in fact, as you know, it goes way back before that in terms of working with the materials. We're talking more like 30 years of experience. We've got a lot to build on, and a lot of stuff to kind of dig back up from the past and bring into this work that we're doing now. It's just that you need to be able to not be constantly fulfilling orders that we do, and our time taken up doing that, so that we've got the free time to do more R&D. That would be part of the plan as well.
yeah. Well, we know recently, after Artecology accessing TikTok, that the kind of general population is receptive to some of these ideas.
Yeah, Yeah, because I mean, there's like, there's a lot of anxiety and worry in the world, and I think even if people aren't particularly sort of tuned in to all of that stuff about the natural world and the problems we face through climate change and biodiversity loss, even if that's not something that they think is in their direct vision, it will be in their peripheral vision because it's there all the time. It's in the news, it's in the papers, it's all over the place. And this sort of eco anxiety that's gradually building in society is going to become more and more prevalent, I think. And people are going to worry more and get depressed more and all that kind of stuff. So every time someone pops up with an idea about something that can be done, and that they can join in with, I think that's why you will get an interest when you put whatever it was, a 30-second video on TikTok, and within 4 days it's got over 300,000 views. There has to be a reason for that. It must be fulfilling some sort of need. And so, yeah, there probably is a bit of a thirst for seeing what, the positive stuff that's going on as a kind of, an antidote to all the negativity that's out there. And I'm not doing that down. It's all real. Although we're interested in the arts, the sciences are, half of what we do. So we're not skeptics on any of this stuff. We absolutely know where this is going. In fact, because of the people we knock around with and the university scientists and our own experts in the organization, we're probably more clued up than many. But I don't think we go to work depressed about it, because each day we feel like there's something we can actually do. There's some material we can get our hands on. There's another habitat that we can make, and it's hugely empowering. It's possible to give that empowerment over to other people. We just got to teach them how to do what we do.
Yeah, I think the fact that the end product is usually, well, it is always some physical thing
Mm.
that that helps so much for people to kind of recognize, as you were kind of saying, the possibilities for doing something and making a difference.
Yeah.
And the kind of conversation is usually a bit ethereal or
Mm.
um, lost in the weeds.
As things get tougher, we won't see sort of fewer and fewer of these kind of empowerment projects coming through. We'll see more, because it's what human beings do. When the chips are down, they tend to get together and collaborate and start to solve problems. When the chips aren't down, and everyone just goes to the shops and buys stuff, or gets on social media and watches nonsense or whatever, that the society is geared up to distract you, and people will happily take the distraction, because that's we're human beings. But when the power goes, or when you have a pandemic, or when society is shocked into doing things differently, we've seen what happens. People get together and they start doing really interesting things. And so I think Artecology Co-Create would just be one of many spontaneous schemes and programs that start springing up out of all sorts of places, that empower people locally to take control of some of these, big problems.
Yeah, I think one sort of line that we sort of repeat often is the fact that our work is based in the landscape, but it's also in the mindscape of people too, and changing people's minds is pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bigger job, really, and I suppose, you know, it is really the job. It's the job of work, you know, because if you look at the scale of the things that we make and we do, they're all pretty small. You know, there's nothing landscape. We're not rewilding. You know, we're not sort of doing massive landscape projects. Uh, but and because the things that we do work on are usually near to where people live, they they've got a way of connecting, you know, the problem with human beings in a way that I think sometimes these big landscape scale projects can't sort of don't do, you know, can't do, because they're just too big to grasp what's going on. So I think there, you know, we've got some advantages in terms of how we become architects of the, with, if that's not too grand a way of putting it, you know, of the mindscape, how we create mindset changes. And you know, you don't do it by sort of, you know, making lots of noise like I am now. You do it by hands-on, you know, workshops and getting people engaged and involved in what it is you're doing. So, you know, and then their minds will start to change. And we know this is true because we've seen it over and over again with our work, even before Artecology, when we worked a lot in education. We've seen how a creative endeavor can absolutely change people's lives. And you know, how they may have been labeled as one particular thing, and then because they didn't have access to their creativity, they, and then, you know, when a group comes along and says, oh yeah, but what about if you think this way and make and do things this way, you know, put the books down for a minute, let's let's design a thing and make it. And then suddenly they go from being the underachiever to top of the class, you know, if it's in a school scenario. And I've seen that happen over and over and over again. It's just unfortunate that we sort of live in a world where we live at a time and in a kind of society where the arts and crafts have been sort of relegated um, to special, you know, to sort of like a subset of people do that. You've got to be expert to be an artist. You've got to be, you know, and your work goes in galleries or whatever. You know, there's a lot of that. It's like it's almost like seen as profession. It's like, but actually, it's really interesting, right? I'll tell you something.
Mm.
19, so about just after you were born, there was a program there was a series TV. I think it was American or Canadian. It might have been TV series called Due South. I don't remember much about it. Um, some folks will remember more than I do. It was quite popular, but it was about a Canadian Mountie who was really, really square and by the book, and he got posted to, I think it might be in Chicago or somewhere like that. For some reason that I can't actually remember, he took his pet wolf with him, and
Right.
that was probably a husky, but you know, it was sort of wolfy, and and he got teamed up with this very sort of typical gung ho, you know, American cop, and they had, you know, adventures every week. They'd solve a crime, and you know, this Mountie was very very good at kind of tracking and all of that. You know, it was all a bit cliche, I suppose. But anyway, I don't remember any of the plots, but I do remember a line that the lead character, the Mountie character, said, because and he was talking about the Inuit, which is the folks used to be called Eskimos when I was a kid, but I think they're Inuk is their, I think is their proper name. But he was talking about the Inuit, and it just stuck in my mind ever since. And what he said was, the Inuit have no word for art. Instead, they call it the best I can do, and
Hmm.
that just stuck with me. You know, like forever. It's just like, you know, from the 1990s to till now, and I have sort of since kind of, you know, looked up to see whether any of that is true, and I can't find anything about the best I can do bit. But there's plenty that says not just the Inuit, but other native cultures around the planet don't have a name for art, or interestingly, artists. And the Inuk concur with that. They don't. Nobody is an artist because everybody is an artist. So they don't. The word for artist is the same as human. So
Right.
they don't differentiate. And I think that's really, that stuck with, like, the idea of, calling art the best I can do has always stuck with me. And I think it is probably, if you talk to any artist or crafts person, that is what drives them. It's not like, I'm going to be able to sell this painting for, 200 quid or £50,000 or whatever it is. It's this painting, I want it to be the best I can do. And you don't really stop until it is. You're not kind of watching the clock going, oh, blimey, that's another hour gone. That I'm never going to make any money at this. You just want it to be the best that you can do. And going back to what we were saying earlier, that whole thing is taking the whole new relevance from Due South, the TV show. About the Inuk or the Inuit saying that stuff, and I just thought, yeah, that's really, really relevant, to sort of how we feel and actually what we're doing. We would undoubtedly, if we could, we would just spend more and more time on a single object until we sort of said, that's the best I can do, and now it's ready to go out and be, the best habitat it can be. How many eco-engineering firms around the world are doing that? Like, probably none. Well, and not even us, because we can't afford to do it either.
Yeah, it's going to take a bit of sort of, I don't know, not a leap of faith, but just kind of we're just going to do this because it's the right thing to do.
When you do look at things that way, they often turn out all right. It often, when you stop, because like this journey for Artecology for us started off, with ecologist, our co-director Ian Boyd, asking a question about intertidal zones and sea level rise and losing the habitat in the horizontal plane, and then eventually wherever there are hard sea defences, the tide stops going in and out, and so you lose that intertidal zone. And Ian's question was, then it'll start going up and down the hard sea defences. I wonder if it's possible to create some kind of facsimile of a rocky shore habitat on the sea defence itself in a vertical plane. And that's how the project started. So he came, like me, a creative practitioner, and him, an ecologist, then sort of got our heads together. And the thing was that the minute it came out of his, the second it came out of his mouth as a concept, I kind of knew exactly what it was that we had to make. I knew it was a sculpture, but essentially that's how my mind thinks. I could see it, and I made a model out of air drying clay, which we've still got in the studio, and showed it to him. And I said, I think that's it. And he said, yeah, that's it. And so with tiny amount of funding, we made 5 of these things we now call vertiples, as you know, and they're still there to this day on the wall that we installed them. But all of the knowledge that we've now got about how to do what we do all came from those 5 vertiples. They're the most studied. They still exist. There's papers written about them. We know they even outperformed the actual rock pools on the bit of foreshore where they've been installed. They outperformed those. I mean, that's ridiculous. Nobody expected that to happen. So, and then as we've gone on with vertiples and we've put them in different places, we've seen them fill with sediment, and then different species that not water dwelling species but mud dwelling species finding their way, living in high rise essentially. And then those techniques of pattern, texture, and form, that's all sculptural talk, that's all artistic talk, and seeing how relevant they are to creating bioreceptivity, which is the word, eco-engineers use about surfaces and how to bring life to a surface. It's like, it's the sort of it was the perfect meshing together of disciplines. And then we went on this journey of, right, how do we make this efficient? How do we make this so you can make a business out of it? And we tried to kind of keep up with the engineering world. We tried to sort of follow that path for a bit, and realized, pretty much the whole journey, that it was impossible for us to do that. It was impossible for us to compete with them on the one hand, and the desire to compete with them was just sort of like, just kept going away, because it's like, well, that's not actually what we're doing, is it? It's not how we're thinking about this. It's not how we're working. And then I suppose the great sort of revelation was during lockdown, really, when there was time to not do anything. Couldn't go to the studio, just sat in the garden, beautiful blue skies, see nature coming back in ways that nobody had seen before, not in my lifetime, and not in most people's lifetimes, to be honest. Watching nature come back in the curbs and roadsides because nobody was spraying them, realizing that the reason that's happening is because the texture, pattern, and form of some of this hard infrastructure was enough to allow, aerial plankton, seeds, pollen, all of that stuff to wash up in the nooks and crannies. And wherever there was anything that holds on to water, or what, not just in the sea settings, but in the towns and cities. I mean, I know you've seen this stuff yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we watched the waters clear in the Solent. Like Portsmouth Harbour looked like the Mediterranean Sea. I'd never seen anything like it. So coming out of that period, that sort of, because the world stopped, it kind of vindicated our artecology ideas. And then coming out the other side of that, then it was a very short hop to go, hang on a minute, why the hell are we chasing eco-engineering from an engineering perspective? We've got to go back to our roots here. We've got to really engage the craft. Stop trying to dumb down what we do. Let's crank up the craft. Because that's going to get us the best results. And it's also going to create a bit of differentiation as well within the field. Not that there's hundreds of eco-engineers out there isn't, of course, but and it's a massive market share that's available to the handful of organizations that are out there. But I'm not terribly keen on some of the interventions that are going on out there. And so I can feel, anyway, I could feel us moving away, and we've got the ability to move right away from it because of the way that we work, and it's accepted. This is the great thing. Where's all our work coming from? It's coming from the regulators, the environmental regulators themselves. They're putting stipulations on stuff, and that's why we're getting orders from developers or whatever, because the policymakers, really, or the regulators anyway, are saying you've got to go to Artecology rather than some other organization. And that's interesting, and a kind of a bit of a marker, I think, as to why you should stick to what's true to you, and play to your strengths.
Could you imagine if we started a sort of underground movement of biograffiti? So communities were going out and just sort of turning their, I don't know, their town hall into this sort of amazing
Yeah,
sort of
I sort of
bioreceptive.
can, really, because of my
Yeah,
misspent
I
youth.
reckon.
As
Yeah.
a graffiti artist back in the 80s, I know what it is to get up at 3 a.m. and go out and spray on the walls somewhere. And also, of course, we have made a bit of graffiti in in Newcastle with
Yeah.
working with young folks and the Crown Estate and all that. And it was really just scraping the surface of what's possible. But that's sort of the point, really. It's about, you know, like, why do you have to wait for someone to come along to do that? You know, why not design it in the first place? You know, we know that we can retrofit things. You know, we can retrofit verticals, and we can do biograffiti on the side of a building, and it can look like a really beautiful object, but it will come to life. I suppose the real goal is to get to the architects and the designers and the civil engineers, so that they're designing in some of this stuff to start with. You know, that it doesn't have to be an after. Folks like us don't have to come along afterwards. I suppose you've got to approach our subject from all angles and all and all, you know, top down, bottom up, you know, grassroots, whatever it is, policy. You know, you've got to come from it from all directions. Luckily for us, it's not just us working on this stuff, so we don't have to try and do it all. We can just sort of choose a field, really, and say, well, that's feels most like home to us. And that's where the Artecology co-create, I think, really comes in, because it's about people again, you know, health and well-being, public health. You know, all of these things are incredibly important and a valid part of what we do. But again, I'm not entirely sure you'll hear other eco engineers talking about public health, you know, in the same breath as talking about, you know, whatever it is they are doing for ecological uplift. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you could quite comfortably say that if a place was ecologically healthy and its biodiversity was, I don't know, strong, high, whatever measurement you want to do that by, the people that live there are bound to be healthy too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the, you know, Ian's Habitats for Humans thing, isn't it? You know, like, we are and have been. I say we, you know, I mean the sort of civilized, so-called civilized human race societies have been, on the whole, particularly in the last 20 years or so, really, really bad at designing places for us to live, you know, live, work, and play. And it shouldn't be like that, and it doesn't have to be like that. And, you know, if you combine the kind of the, you know, designed in wildlife as part of the remit for shaping better places for people, then you're killing two birds with one stone. That's probably not quite the right phrase to use in these circumstances, but
Mm.
you know what I mean. You know, you're doing two things at once. So yeah, I mean, you know, bring wildlife to a place, and all the data is out there that you will see health outcomes improve, learning outcomes improve, crime rates go down. You know, the list is sort of endless, really, and it's all there. The data's there. You know, I don't have to go and sort of work on these things. The data is out there. You know, we're hardwired to, as human beings, we're hardwired to respond very positively to the natural world, and even things like birdsong. Just access to birdsong can have a, you know, a kind of almost prescription like effect on your health, your physical health, but also your mental health and well-being as well. So it's worth doing. You know, it's absolutely worth doing.